Because no one in these games I've done, many different countries, many different communities, has ever intentionally tried to do harm or bad things to others. But the perception was that was exactly what was happening, and then you got into this self-fulfilling prophecy. Mistrust leading to mistrust, leading to a downward cycle. On the other hand, you get some remarkable insights sometimes. I'll never forget, for me, one of the most moving moments occurred. Two, I'll tell you two. One was had the rebels and the army, a commission had formed to prepare for the newly integrated army. And they'd been totally blocked. They worked for 5 months, they hadn't gotten anything accomplished. So they asked us to see if we could ungel or gel this process. And so, unblock the process. And so we did our 3 days of training, as we usually do. And then on the 4th day, we did something a little different. We put up flip charts in front of the room, and we said, we want all of you to tell us not what your interests are, but what you understand to be the interests of the other side. So one rebel leader raised his hand and said, well, what the Tutsis are worried about, the commanders of the army, is that we Hutus are going to do another genocide, like in Rwanda. And we put that up on the sheet. And then another Hutu rebel raised his hand and said, and what the army people are worried about is that we rebels are going to come in and take all their jobs. And indeed, those were the two most profound fears. No one ever said that, but those were the fears. So that went up on the sheet. And then an Tutsi army commander raised his hand and said, and what the Hutus are worried about is that we're going to continue to control the army, and the army will continue to protect only one segment of the population, i.e. the Tutsis. Well, the moment each side heard the other articulating their own worst fears, that was recognition of how serious they were and wanting to work through to a different way of relating to one another. We had offered to do mediation to help solve these problems they were stuck on. And the Tutsi and Hutu commanders went and met and came back to us. Said, look, if we need you, we'll call you, but we think we can do this now ourselves. Let us try. And within about 10 days, they had solved it. They'd gone back using these techniques. And I still remember at the end of the 6-day retreat, the Tutsi commander, the oldest man there, stood up and said that when he went back into Burundi, he was going to put up a big poster on the wall in his office with these words, "Put yourself in the shoes of the other." And when I went into Burundi, in Bujumbura, some weeks later, by God, that was up in his office. And I'm told they constantly refer back to that now when they get stuck on stuff.
Questions on this side of the room?
Yeah, how about here and then over there? Over here. Oh, I'm sorry. Well, go ahead.
Okay, I have a question that's related to some of the problems that come up. I ran into a fellow a few weeks ago who was European, worked in Rwanda, teaching and helping out with labor organizations. And his concern was that, from his observation, that everything was going to go to hell again in the next couple of years because of the influence of external parties, particularly Asian, European, American companies and their governments interested in resources over there, interested in getting them for themselves. To what extent do you see that as being a significant issue?
In Rwanda, specifically?
Rwanda, Burundi?
No, I mean, I worry about Rwanda a lot. Some of the conventional wisdom you see in the press is that Rwanda is done better than Burundi in economic development and transparency and anti-corruption and so on. But I think Rwanda is a much sicker society than is Burundi. And they both, it's fascinating because here you have two societies that have gone through somewhat similar experiences, but they've each approached the resolution differently. In Rwanda, they're into denial. There are no Tutsis, no Hutus, we're all Rwandans. And the leadership really believes that if you keep saying that over enough years, it'll begin to stick. And as a consequence, there is no honest discussion of Tutsi or Hutu grievances. In the case of Hutus that go back over many, many years of the colonial period in Rwanda, and are the backdrop for the genocide that took place against Tutsi. And that's dangerous. It's just really dangerous. It's also a very authoritarian society, very controlled. And though I have enormous respect for Paul Kagame, who I've worked with over many years, I don't think he's on the right track here. I think they're creating a very dangerous situation down the road. It has nothing whatever to do with external influences, everything to do with the internal situation. In the Congo is the one place where you have a lot of external actors messing around, and the extent to which but the problems are again more deeper and go much more to the internal situation. In Kabila, you have a terribly weak leader. He has begun to be as corrupt as Mobutu. So you have this endemic corruption at all levels now in Congo, as you did under Mobutu. You've got increasingly authoritarian style governance, and I worry a lot. If Kabila remains as president, there's an election coming up, I think we're in trouble in Congo, notwithstanding some of the work we've been doing there on the ground, which has had huge impact. But if you don't have your top leader doing some correct things, it can blow it all. In Burundi is too poor to, no one from the outside pays much attention. That's the problem. I wish there was more external involvement in Burundi by way of economic investment and so on. Because they're just a terribly impoverished society, as is Rwanda. They both are.
Question right here.
I'll get you there.
I tended to agree with the other fellow earlier who wondered about bringing the process to legislatures and the federal legislature, but that's for another day. I wonder if, in fact, some of those principles were being used, functioning, when you were in the Michigan legislature, when you had Speaker Bryant from a black district, you had Speaker Pro Tem McNeely, and you had the Black Caucus and the UP caucus would trade back and forth. They would vote for whatever the UP wanted and back and forth. My last question is, how did you deal with the folks who were not chosen initially? What was the chance that they were going around bad-mouthing or otherwise sabotaging the project?
First comment on Michigan. Yeah, what you saw in Michigan was a very traditional political process. Quid pro quo, political exchanges, caucuses would support each other, and in addition they'd be supported the next time, and so on. Yeah, a lot of that was happening, that's true. I'm not sure I'd characterize that as deep trust among these constituencies. But it worked. I mean, at least it kept the system going. It wasn't as polarized. Now, in an earlier period during the busing campaigns and all, I suspect that there's a lot more tension in the legislature then than when I entered the legislature, I suspect. In terms of the folks who wanted in who couldn't be accommodated, we'd always say, oh, there's going to be another workshop. And yeah, we were really so nervous initially that if we did the wrong thing, we could literally put our lives in jeopardy. That's how tense and volatile the environment was. And one of the things I still remark at is how we came through this without any serious problems. And I think that was attributable to the trust we had established with the leaders of all these key groups so they could manage their own constituencies.
We have time for one more question. Right here.
Has your process been used successfully in a country where religion is the main conflict?
No, not yet. I wanted to use it in Iraq, actually. And at one point there was some discussion of that, but it never happened. I do not believe personally that there's any difference between religious communalism than ethnic communalism or racial communalism. It's all the same stuff. People use these identities in a manipulative fashion to try to ensure their security or to try to put others down because they are insecure. I don't think it ought to be inherently any different. Now, there may be some outliers. I mean, I suspect that Osama bin Laden might be a little difficult to get into one of these processes. But I think that for the, I think Shia and Sunni in Iraq sound to me like Hutu and Tutsi in Burundi.
Well, please join me in thanking Dr. Howard Wolpe for being our guest tonight.
Yeah. I just want to say how wonderful it is to see a lot of old friends. It really is great. Really glad to be home again.